Hello everybody and welcome to Should You Play, a first impression series where I'll cover more niche titles and break down their good and bad. The difference between this series and a full-on review is that I haven't experienced everything the game has to offer, instead maybe playing around 5 to 10 hours in order to get a good grasp of the game and then relay it back to you. So in the first episode here we're asking should you play Field of Glory 2? Now Field of Glory 2 is a tabletop style battle game. It features a deep tactical battle system and scenario editor, coupled with a small campaign that you can play through. There's no campaign map or any real strategic thinking in the campaign, it's more just a series of battles that string together, where what you do in one battle will affect what you do in the next. It has 3 tutorials which for the most part do a good job of introducing players to the different layers of systems at play, such as deployment, movement, combat, terrain, positioning, and the meta between units. It is really text heavy though, so you'll spend a lot of time in the beginning reading how to play the game, much as you would a rulebook for a tabletop game. The battlefields you fight on are randomly generated each time, with pretty complex terrain features like valleys, rivers, mountains and forests. You can also create your own maps and even your own campaign scenarios that string together several maps and share them online, so there's a great amount of variety for the types of maps and terrain that you'll have to fight on and think about. Before starting a battle, you'll deploy your troops and choose any extras you want to take into the fight. During this phase, it's the best time to devise your general strategy and how you'll use the terrain. Rivers, for instance, are impassable and will require you to find crossing points, and high ground allows you to fight with an advantage. Rough terrain, hillsides and streams will disorganize your troops as they can't really form up too well, hindering their combat abilities, and depending on the troop types, forests, villages and open ground yield advantages and disadvantages. So after you figure out what style of play will suit the terrain, you can begin picking your army. Generally speaking, there's a predetermined army set for you to use, and then you decide on extras by spending points to fill up the rest. There are hard limits on all the troops, so you can't just field huge armies of one type of unit. Units also have really cool variations. We'll use legionaries as an example. You can get veteran legionaries, which fight regularly, regulars, which fight every now and then, slack legionaries, which haven't fought in a while, and raw legionaries who have no combat experience. It's a really cool addition, and each faction has these types of units. Sending in raw recruits somewhere really shows, as they get hammered if they don't have serious levels of support. So because of this, the units really feel like they have personality. Now these battles can get pretty complicated, so I'm just going to break down the most obvious systems that affect gameplay. So the battles are grid based, and the troops have a facing direction. It costs action points to do anything with a unit, so for example if we want to move forward it'll cost a certain amount, and similarly if we want to turn it'll cost a certain amount. Now at first this might seem normal, but for instance, turning a unit will cost almost all of its action points for that turn. Most infantry is made up of thousands of men, usually 2,000 or more, so you can imagine them asking to shift their lines would take a huge effort before they would form up and be cohesive again. This is why deployment is so important. You simply won't have the time to reform up much later on. This isn't the case with missile infantry or loose infantry in general. More flexible and lighter units can move a lot more freely, passing through their own allies and doing full 180 rotations and still having action points to perform an attack. When a unit is in command range of their general, they actually gain a 45-degree turn for free, so having commanders present allows them to organize the battlefield around them more effectively, and you can have multiple commanders. That's pretty much movement in a nutshell. It's cumbersome and it can be complicated to form up nice lines and flanks, especially with cavalry. A typical cavalry flank takes 3 or 4 turns to execute properly, so it's a big deal when you do it, especially because battles tend to last around 25 turns. But I love that it's cumbersome. It feels so deliberate when you see large stacks of cavalry in the thousands coming for you and you don't have time to react to them. You can really imagine how a commander would feel.
Sir, there's 7,000 cavalry on the move on our right flank.
Arthurius spears are currently stationed on the left flank. We need to move them right now to bolster our right.
Sir, that kind of maneuver will disrupt your rear and take hours for them to reach the other side.
Do it anyway. We can slow the cavalry down with artillery, maybe even disrupt them.
We've given them a direct hit, sir, but they've remained intact.
Their cavalry are within our reach, sir. Should we charge or brace for impact?
Countercharge them, Tiberius.
Sir, they've scattered, pulling our legions and auxiliaries deep out of our right flank, completely leaving us exposed. Now that's just an example situation with some awful VO that I could imagine was happening on the ground level of this high level battlefield. There's incredible weight and importance to each decision. My counter-cavalry charge ultimately set me very far back and exposed my lines, eventually causing my downfall in the battle much later on. On charging into an enemy cavalry unit, the cavalry have a chance of evasion. If successful, the cavalry unit can pull back several tiles to safety. There's another chance that your unit might actually pursue them and chase the evaders, pulling themselves deeper out of their lines. It's risky, but generally it makes sense. 1,200 cavalry spot 2,000 spearmen heading their way, they're gonna turn tail and run to get a better angle. 2,000 spearmen have a chance that they might pursue in the hopes of catching them or hold their ground. Now when combat does ensue, there's two systems at play, the impact values and then the melee values. Some units will do much more damage on impact, and you can hope to break the enemy with that initial hit. And then there's the melee damage, which is considered close quarters combat where different variables play into effect. Units will have organization stats, which essentially is their morale. On open ground, a unit is well organized. On rough ground or hillsides, or maybe even after significant combat, they can be moderately disorganized. Then they become disrupted, then fragmented, and then broken. Disrupted and fragmented units fight way worse in combat, and broken units run. Each turn, a broken unit will do a dice roll to see if it comes back, if it disperses, or if it continues running. Eventually, a routing unit will hit the edge of the board and run off it, and then you'll never get it back. As well as that, whether a unit becomes fragmented or not is also based on random chances. So once two units are locked into melee, they'll grind each other down with random chances of them breaking. The chances and odds are increased based on the terrain types and amount of hits they've taken, and also the troop quality. So it's not entirely just chance, but chance is influenced by the figures at play. It's really cool. It actually plays out very well, however I find the game to be extremely difficult. I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I seem to almost always lose or take huge casualties on medium settings, and I struggle to beat overwhelming numbers, which is often what happens in the campaigns. Now graphically speaking, Field of Glory is pretty underwhelming, there's no getting around it. The terrain is pretty much fine, it creates a nice board game aesthetic, but the units do look like modded Rome Total War units. The UI is extremely bare bones and text heavy, and relies on very simplified result screens and camera scripting, which can make it hard to see what's going on in a given fight at times. And as well as that, there's no battle music, and the sound is just kind of the same ambient loop that plays over and over. Now Byzantine Games are obviously a small studio here, so I don't want to be too punishing, but I do have to question why this type of game is 3D at all. If I was a designer there, I would ask myself what 3D is even bringing to the table. You can rotate the camera, sure, but ultimately I'd double down on an isometric 2D look, and the gameplay would be the exact same. 2D is also much cheaper to work with, generally speaking, so I think the game would have looked much better, being just as functional and maybe even having a cheaper asking price on Steam. They could have even used the same engine, just with a fixed perspective, and made it with 2D assets. I just don't know what pursuing this as a 3D game does for it. Games like Age of Empires Remastered or the Banner Saga both look great, from older low quality art to the newer hand-drawn art. Anything in between would have been fine for this game. Now I'm a pretty superficial gamer. I like good graphics, I'm not proud of it, but I do. It's actually a really big factor in games for me. I probably never would have let Total War get its hooks into me without the scale of the battles and the details of the soldiers, coupled with the beauty of the campaign map. It's the same reason why I can't really get invested in too many Paradox titles. Looking at maps and rough models clipping and janking around places just really takes me out of the experience. So when a game like Field of Glory 2 comes along looking how it does, it takes a lot for me to look beyond the quality of art in the game, but it has managed to grab me time and time again, which I think speaks to just how fun and interesting the gameplay is. The reason for this is because of how it makes me feel when I play it. I feel like a commander, dealing with the unknown and a large variety of enemies. Dealing with terrain variations, large numbers of troops, various types of morale and troop quality. I can look beyond the simplified graphics and the bare bones UI. If you're looking for glitzy battles and picturesque battlefields, you won't find it here, but if you're looking for solid gameplay, then look no further. So, should you play Field of Glory 2? It is a bit pricey for the look of the game, but honestly it's so much fun. If you like historical games or old school strategy games, then it's great, and there's tons of hours in the campaigns and mastering the game's core systems. I haven't yet touched multiplayer, but Byzantine and Slytherin hold tournaments every now and then, and I think it could be a lot of fun. So yeah, you should play it. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you like this type of video and want to see more short form recommendations, then let me know in the comments. Or if you don't have the time to type that stuff out, hit that like button, it really helps out a lot. That's going to be all from me, and I'll see you in the next one.